Large outdoor events across the country have been canceled because of the coronavirus pandemic. Spring and summer are typically the busiest seasons of the year for festival workers. In California, nearly 1 million workers applied for pandemic unemployment assistance between mid-March and early June. On the East Coast, Maine's largest summer festival has also been canceled. It means a loss of income for businesses, workers, and state and local governments. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News campaign reporters Musadiq Bidar in California and Nicole Sganga on the East Coast in Washington, D.C. Musadiq, let's go ahead and start with you first. What are the workers who rely on seasonal events doing to make a living right now?
Well, they're looking for new ways. There are more than 1.5 million workers in California who rely on seasonal events, on independent contracting work, and right now they're scrambling, but they're also using this as an opportunity to learn new skills. I spoke with a team of sculptors and builders and painters who work on seasonal events, building parades and floats, and they told me that they are learning new skills. Stephanie Muffson, who I spoke with, is the owner of Parade Guys, a small business here in the Bay Area. She said she's going back to graduate school to learn visual design. Same thing with Brian Travis, who is a musician and a painter. He said that he is reconnecting with his music and hoping that the tips that he's receiving from the weekly online shows that he's doing for his friends and family will help continue to buy groceries for him. And similar story with Lacey Bryant, who works at theme parks throughout the summer and builds haunted houses looking forward into the fall. She said she's staying at home, painting herself, working on her own paintings in hopes that the commission she's earning from this will help get her through the pandemic. So they're all scrambling, but at the same time, they're seeing this as an opportunity to learn new skills and supplement their careers once things return back to normal.
And Nicole, when a festival is postponed, there's a large impact to the surrounding community, in addition to the people who are directly affected, the workers in those festivals. You wrote this week about the Fryeburg Fair in Maine. What's the impact of that one fair shutting down?
Well, the Fryeburg Fair is Maine's largest festival, and it does employ over 650 seasonal workers with a payroll of over $1.3 million, Lana. But we should also point that a 2016 study of the Fryeburg Fair found that it contributed over $21.5 million to the regional GDP. And that means a lot to local businesses, and not just the hospitality industry. Of course, hotels and restaurants are impacted, but also just members of this community, this tiny town of 3,400 people who rely on the fair to supply some supplemental income. So for instance, neighbors who rent out space in their backyard for parking at $100 a head no longer have that supplemental income to rely on, in addition to local businesses and craftspeople who are used to selling their products at this festival year in and year out. And this is a festival that's been happening for over 150 years. It endured through the Spanish flu of 1918, 2 world wars, but it typically brings nowadays people from 50 states and over 20 countries to this tiny town in Maine. So festival planners said they just couldn't continue in good conscience bringing so many outsiders into their tiny town. And they consulted with local public health and safety experts who recommended that they postpone it until next October.
That's really interesting, Nicole. So they were able to withstand the Spanish flu and still continue. But am I hearing from you that part of their concern was that as the festival has grown and as transportation options have become more plentiful for people, that in this case, in this pandemic, they felt like the public health responsible thing to do was to shut down because of those reasons?
That's absolutely right, and they consulted with local emergency workers who said they weren't quite sure if they would even have the capacity should Fryeburg, the tiny town, become a hotspot for this pandemic. Maine has also instituted quarantine rules for those coming into the state for a 14-day period, so they weren't even sure if it was feasible, if they did open up, if people would come. So I was told by the president of the Fryeburg Fair it was a near unanimous decision to postpone Maine's biggest festival until next year.
So, Musadiq, you and Nicole and all of our other campaign reporters have been collecting these individual stories, and I talk to you every week about these COVID chronicles, about how individuals are being affected in various parts of the country. I just want to check back in with you now about how small businesses that you're talking to have been adjusting and how much longer they think they can survive the pandemic.
Well, it's been very tough for them to adjust. As I mentioned, Stephanie Muffson, she's the owner of Parade Guys. It's a small business that builds parades for many of the seasonal events here in San Francisco and in Northern California. She started the year with about 25 employees. They were working full-time every day. They helped prepare for the Chinese New Year, which was in early February. And then she had to lay off all but one of her employees. She told me that she has about 6 months of runway left. She knows that she's going to have to make some difficult decisions. One of those tough choices she hopes she doesn't have to make is laying off her final employee, who also happens to be a close friend of hers. She said she has some money saved from previous contracts to help get her through the end of the year. But she said that if she's not working on parades or other events by December, it's going to be tough to continue on. In the meantime, she's also exploring other ways to continue working in the float industry. One idea Stephanie Muffson told me she is pushing for is drive-through parades. Instead of you going out, standing in an area for a long time and watching the parade drive by you, you would go to an area where the parades are set up, drive by with your car, stop, take photos, and enjoy it in a socially distanced way. She said she's hoping to get some more traction for that idea as a way to continue working in this industry while innovating it.
We've seen drive-through church services, drive-through weddings, and now perhaps even drive-through parades. All right, Nicole, what kinds of businesses and industries have been the hardest hit by all of these cancellations? And do you have any other stories, too, about people who have been innovating in the pandemic?
Well, absolutely. And we should point out that Maine typically puts on about 169 festivals per year. So, some of those hospitality and leisure numbers have dipped. Employment in that sector has dropped by 50% since February. But in terms of individuals I've been speaking to, a lot of people in the crafts industry that typically visit 1 dozen or 2 dozen of these festivals and set up their own stands selling their goods say that they have no way to find personal income this year. So I talked to Susan and Richard Johnson. They run their own pottery business out of Rockland, Maine, which is the lobster capital of the world and typically sees, the Lobster Festival every year, which is canceled this year. And so they're used to setting up their stands at all of Maine's festivals and festivals in New England. And this year they say they've all been canceled. They're not sure how they're going to pay for their taxes. In addition to that, the wedding industry, which is a massive industry, has been hit hard. I spoke with Tim Marshall that runs one of the biggest tent companies out of New England, and he says that he's seen hundreds of weddings canceled with brides and grooms not wanting to bring in family to the New England area from outside until September or October. He says he's making about 10% of what he used to be making. He's had to furlough 40 of his workers, and most of his tents right now are going to restaurants that are trying to reopen their businesses, hospitals that have been trying to rent out his tents to provide overflow testing and capacity in New England. But again, he is just making a fraction of what he used to be able to make in his tent business.
Everyone trying to innovate and trying so hard to just weather this storm. All right. Musadiq, Bidar, and Nicole Sganga, thank you.